anything else to this instrument, we're going to check the action, we're going to check the neck relief. The reason we're doing this before we pull the strings is because we need tension on the neck, and obviously we can't have any tension without strings, preferably when it's close to being in tune. To test this, basically we're going to take our first finger, put it up at the 12th fret, right here, first finger on the first fret on the 6th string. And what I'm doing is I'm looking directly down at the 5th fret. And when I say fret, I'm not talking about in between the frets, I'm looking at the actual fret itself, the piece of metal that's embedded in the neck. When I look at that, I see, eyeballing this, I can start to see the relief, the curvature of the strings in relationship with the neck. The more and more guitars you set up, the better at this you get. There are measurements for this, there are tolerances for this. If we were to get really scientific about it, I have a measuring tool here, actually from an old motorcycle carburetor kit, I think I stole from my father. This is in 32nds of an inch. We would expect to see on a Stratocaster about the width of a business card. At the 5th fret, I should be able to slide this in, see if I can do this with one hand, while holding the first up here. And I can't, there's plenty of relief here. Now, if there was too much relief, what you would feel is that the strings would start to come actually off of the neck. If I hold the guitar like this, and I want to knock my lamp out, the strings would actually be pulling off the neck this way in relationship with the neck. That's called up bowing. Up bowing is very, very typical for a guitar that's been sitting, especially if it's exposed to humidity and atmospheric pressure changes. Let's say you stored it in the attic, or if you stored it in a damp basement. So what we are looking for is to have that perfect amount of relief, keeping in mind that we are playing a 21 fret instrument. So we only have about up to this playable range here. If it was a 22 or even a 24 fret instrument, I would almost be looking for 2 areas of relief. You don't typically find that with a Stratocaster. You'd find that with like an ESP or a Jackson or something from the 80s that was more of a hard rock heavy metal guitar. Floyd Rose bridge and tuning setup. This is a pretty old school 1950s standard design here, with the exception of a couple goodies that it's got installed. I got lucky with this instrument. The relief looks dead on. It is a good indication that it's been taken care of. It's probably been in a case in someone's house, maybe in the closet. So there's no need to adjust the relief on this. So unfortunately I can't show you with this instrument how to adjust the truss rod. I'm sure down the line we will definitely come across an instrument that needs this. Typically what you would do is, if it's up bowed, you would want to tighten the neck so that the neck is actually brought backwards. It's a tough angle to show you from here, but there is an adjustment at the top of the neck. Try it on that camera. Right in that hole there, there's an Allen key. Some guitars have a hex key. Some older style Stratocasters, Telecasters, Broadcasters, Esquires, they actually have the adjustment at the lower part of the neck, so the neck actually has to come off of the instrument. So in that case, you just have to kind of eyeball it. You take an educated guess, you pull the neck, you do the adjustment there, you put it back. Next set of strings, if it's still off, you make note of that and change it. Truss rod adjustments are also difficult because when you make them, you generally need 24 hours or so for everything to stabilize, because basically what you've got with the skunk's tail going up and down here, there's a metal rod. There's a steel rod in here, and it does take time for the wood and everything else to follow suit with the steel, because it is a much harder material. Just get a baseline for string height from the 12th fret to the string. So it's about 3/32. If I were to show you what this looks like on the camera, it's tough to tell, but that's about 3/32. So all in all, the setup doesn't look awful on this instrument. We're going to go ahead and pull the strings. Okay, Now with the strings off the instrument, I like to go ahead and check out some of the hardware. The saddles on the bridge all feel pretty tight. The controls feel okay. They could definitely use a little spray. This one's a little loose actually. We'll pull the pick guard because I want to identify what these pickups are. This feels great. This 5-way selector. It's got me thinking this all is probably replaced at one point. I mean, obviously the covers were, but I think this is all aftermarket stuff. Also, this has a tilt neck. I didn't really get into that. A tilt neck is designed to kind of take the place of what you would do in an older setup where you would have a shim here, depending if you couldn't get the relief quite right without screwing up some of the intonation. We'll get to intonation once we get the strings back on. But generally with the American made Strats and the made in Japan ones, which are equal quality if not better than the American stuff from this era, I have a few, you don't really need the shim. That's more for a kind of a pretty well weathered aged guitar, and this thing ain't that old. The frets look really good. The neck's got some nice normal wear going on. I also look at the tuning machines up here. I'm gonna be real lazy with this because I'm not getting up to go to the garage to get my tool. They are tight. There's nothing wrong with these. I don't even have to mess with them. Feels like honestly somebody maintained this guitar. The only thing I'm gonna make a quick adjustment. These are Godot style tuners. They're American, but they're actually kind of a copy that Fender did of Godot, which is a German manufacturer, big in the 80s. And they have, everybody thinks this is just to hold the machine together, but it's actually a slight adjustment that you can make at the top. It's just a flat blade, that's all it is. Do not over tighten these. If you over tighten, you will crush the plastic. It's like a Delrin washer in there. You want it snug to the point where there's pressure to turn, but nothing more than that. Now these string trees that are up here, these are called roller trees. Something you'd find on the Strat Plus models, even though this isn't a Strat Plus. Roller trees, there's really no maintenance to them. You grease them like everything else. If this was a standard tree retainer at the top, I leave everything loose. I think a happy guitar is a loose guitar. Pickups are gonna need some adjusting. The pickups are kind of all over the place, even eyeballing it. This one goes down, this one goes way down, this one is pretty moderate. So we're probably gonna wind up making them all look like this. In terms of the bridge, there's not a whole lot. I'm gonna go ahead and just remove the back plate because I'm interested in seeing this tremolo. If I was setting up a guitar and not making a video on it, there's really no need to remove this because there's an inspection cover. You just make sure that you haven't, the springs and the tremolo haven't moved. All right, so this is kind of an interesting setup. You don't see a lot of these sprung in this way. So it's got a 4-spring and they're parallel springs with one missing in the center. Generally, you'll see a 3-spring setup or a 5-spring setup on a Stratocaster. This is an aftermarket tremolo block. It's very heavy. It's almost like a lead kind of a block. It's got a lot of density to it. It's made by Callahan. Also has a Callahan bridge. This is all aftermarket. It's nice. It fits the era too. Sometimes people put really kind of hokey hardware and bridges and tremolos thinking that it's going to make them sound completely different, and it couldn't be further from the truth. 99% of the time you play with the stock hardware and the guitar sounds terrific. This is just kind of a fun thing that they added to this instrument. And I like the 4-spring. I've never played this era instrument with a 4-spring tremolo. It's pretty responsive, but it still holds tune pretty well. General rule of thumb is that With more springs on a tremolo, you're gonna have more stability, but you'll have a little bit less playability in terms of the vibrato piece. The 60s, like the Ventures and the Pyramids, and I'm a big listener of Chris Isaak, his band when he had Jimmy Wilesy playing on the guitar, and that kind of 60s surf sound with rockabilly kind of infused with it. There's no right or wrong method. I prefer to have a looser sounding Strat because I like the natural tremolo. This is a cool sound. It's closer to the conservative side, but it's a good upgrade. Curious what it had before that. First thing I want to do is just take paper towels. This is some Dunlop Fretboard 65. It's lemon oil, that's all it is. Gonna go over the neck with it. You can be pretty liberal with this stuff. You never, ever, ever want to use straight water or soap, any kind of solvent other than lemon oil on any guitar neck ever. Reason being, it dries out the wood, it removes the natural oils. What we're basically doing right now is just exfoliating the guitar in a totally gross way. There's about 30 years worth of dead skin. We're also cleaning the frets so that we can see if any of them need filing down. This thing honestly looks great. I'm not even gonna mess with it. What I am gonna do very quickly is just wipe the guitar down. Just as a quick in-between string changes, I use this. It's just Gibson polish, it's Carnauba based. In a pinch, you could use furniture polish, there's nothing wrong with it. Again, lemon oil is great. Keep an eye on your towels when you do this. Make sure they don't get too soiled, especially with a black instrument. Put scratches into it. You don't want to do that. If we really, really wanted to go to town on this, we'd pull everything in wet sand and buff it. I'm not going to do that with this instrument because I don't know how deep the paint goes in some spots. It looks like it's worn pretty thin on the edges, so it's probably not worth it. You could wind up actually burning through the paint. And honestly, these scratches are so fine that this stuff is gonna get it right out, no problem. I am going to put some guitar grease. This is just graphite oil. I'm gonna put it on the rollers. I'm gonna put it on the nut up at the top that I cleaned as well. And I'm gonna put it on the saddles. The reason this is so important though is because it's probably the most overlooked part of changing strings. I do this every time I change strings, not just with a setup. The reason being, if this dries out in the nut, in this area here, or at the bridge in some guitars, not so much Strats, if this dries out, as I'm playing, my string is no longer going to move here. When I bend the strings, it's going to hang up in here, meaning when I bend the string, it's not going to have any play in it like it naturally should, especially you start throwing in these more intricate tremolo setups. So it's so important to have grease every time. These actually may be stock pickups. And then the pots, the potentiometers, those look totally stock. And they've got, trying to read the capacitors on them. Stock capacitors, it looks like, good. This doesn't look like that David Gilmour kit that I had seen online, which is fine, I don't care. It sounds great. It's got some basic shielding. A lot of people go crazy with the pickguard shielding underneath. This whole thing will be, it looks like it's almost like a Faraday cage to keep out signals and everything, but in actuality, the guitar is a giant antenna. No matter how you slice it, you can ground the thing, but you are at the mercy of the clean power source, hopefully clean, that you're playing through. So all the shielding in the world, I don't know, is it worth it? I feel like it's an old guy thing that they play around with and spend a lot of time on. But, you know, a little bit of shielding here and there, making sure that your grounds are consistent and clean, making sure that this input jack is tight and that there's no, you know, squingeal on the tab itself. That's more important than anything. So, okay, we will identify the pickups and we'll be back.